when we think in terms of concept of religious politics, it means it's a combination of two words, religion and politics. And both terms joined together is come to be religious politics. You know, broadly, it involves notions of religion, culture, tradition, modernity, nation, human relations, etc. It will be all about the role of religion in mobilizing the national movements like caste, language, gender, region. From region, it is called regionalism. From language, it's known linguistic. Then from gender, it is gender politics. From religion, it's communal politics. The adjective of religion can be communal. So religious politics tends to be communal politics, and mostly how religion impacts the state of politics. Definitely, in the contemporary analysis, we shall find they are related. But I want to take you back to the philosophy of Machiavelli. Those who have some idea of Machiavelli, you know, Machiavelli is known as child of Renaissance. Probably is the first Western philosopher who wants to keep religion away from politics. To keep religion away of politics. Because there are two important trends, Reformation and Renaissance in the world of Christianity, in the Western world. And it's known that it is always said that Niccolo Machiavelli is the child of Renaissance. He has written two important works, The Prince and the Discourses. The Prince is meant to give some sort of advice to the Prince of Medici, which was a small principality of Italy. And his role is exactly the role of Chanakya to Chandragupta Maurya, who had given practical guidelines for the statecraft. You know, you must know that there was a time when the whole Christian world, both in the temporal side and in the ecclesiastical side, it was dominated by Pope. That means Pope was not only the head of the religious world, but also Pope tried to influence the temporal administration. Ecclesiastic side, the temporal administration को मध्य Pope was influencing. And Machiavelli, the first philosopher to say that unless we keep the influence of Pope away from temporal administration, the state administration, then we cannot expect a better administration. से समय जो मैंने papacy बा pope कर influence को support करते advocates, they became highly critical about Machiavelli's philosophy by saying that his philosophy is immoral because he has a distrust of religion. But in fact, it is not like that. Those who are the unwashed critics of Machiavelli, they try to interpret that Machiavelli's philosophy was neither immoral nor amoral, it was non-moral. While dealing with the statecraft, religious precepts should be kept away. The state administration is something different. You must have known that he has talked about double standard of morality. And what is that? That when the king is ruling, he always enjoys one type of standard of morality, which the common citizens they do not enjoy. Because king must be very impartial. If he only sticks to the norms of religion to decide the problems of the state, then he cannot do justice. Once he had a very nice analysis of the human psychology. You must be acquainted with that. When he says that man can forgive the murder of his father than the confiscation of his patrimony. So he talks about man's greed, man's attachment for the material world. So that was a time religion and politics were kept apart. Trend of Renaissance. So he was termed to be the child of Renaissance. But Machiavelli's precepts, they no more hold good in the contemporary politics because they have already spent some time on explaining the role of ethnicity, caste, class, religion, gender. So, present day, whatever may be the dimension of communal politics, you cannot set aside the religion because it has been an important factor which impacts not only politics but also human life because that is a sentimental issue. So communal politics, voting according to the religious lines, it has become a very significant trend. So the concept has assumed heightened significance in the contemporary India. So the close affinity between people and religion, it has also resulted in social disharmony, discord, often leading to clashes between different communities, religious communities. और सेटा सबुठार दुखर कथा वर्ल्ड रो जेते रिलीजन अच्छी समस्ते नॉन वायलेंस को प्रीच करूछथि के वायलेंस को सपोर्ट करना हंती सब रिलीजन पीसफुल एक्जिस्टेंस ऊपर एम्फसाइज करूछथि शांतिपूर्ण सहावस्थान ऊपर गुरुत्व दैछथि बट यू नो if we ransack the history of humanity the bloodiest of the revolutions they have happened only on the question of religion. There is a big contradiction. कौन से रिलीजन हिंसा रे विश्वास करना समस्त शांति ऊपर गुरुत्व दउचंती किंतु रिलीजन आरे सबुठारु violent revolutions they have taken place. You see the irony. So religious politics definitely has become a very significant trend. It is relevant to explain the first meaning of politics. You know, आमे तो politics बोले शब्द को use करूचे. It doesn't mean that only the politics of the party. Because you know, there are many political parties which have been formed on the basis of religion, on religious identity, communal parties. And mostly they have come to occupy the power. And in most cases, they have also formed the government. So, religion itself becomes kind of politics. You know, अपना religion तक politics को अलगा केंद्र करिए. It has itself become a kind of politics. For example, reinterpretation of religious tradition for defining nationalism, or drawing a political program of action. So sometimes people resort to religion, the religious parameters. So this can have many variations. And another factor is, secondly, a condition where religion used as the foundation for the political mobilization of the people. ଯେମିତି caste identity, ସେମିତି religious identity ଟା ମଧ୍ୟ ବହୁତ important. କାରଣ religion constitutes one of the primary sentiments of the human being. ଅନେକ political party ଯୋଉମାନେ ମୋଷ୍ଟଲି କମିଆଲ ସେମାନେ ନିର୍ଦ୍ଦିଷ୍ଟ ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ ଗ୍ରୁପ ର ଗୋଟେ କ୍ୟାଣ୍ଡିଡେଟ କୁ ଫିଲ୍ଡ କରିକିରି ସେଇ ରିଲିଜନ ର ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ଭୋଟଟାକୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଆଣିବା ପାଇଁ they try to bring the support of that particular religious group. So the question is, in the contemporary society, there is no point in saying that religion must be kept apart. Rather, we must see that what type of relationship between religion and politics should be healthy. आमे क्या religion और politics के अलगा करी रखी परिवानी. परंतु the present day analysts must think in terms of what type of relationship should exist between religion and politics so that we can head towards one healthy society and ultimately one healthy democracy. So there are also divergent, divergent views on religious politics. ଆପଣ ମାନେ ଶୁଣି ପାରୁଛନ୍ତି ତ? Am I clearly audible to all of you? Hello? Am I audible, all of you? Religious politics, as we have seen, provides the substance and agenda of politics. It not only defines what place an individual should have within a religious community, it also explains what kind of relations should be there between different religious communities. ଏଣୁ ଗୋଟେ ଇଣ୍ଡିଭିଜୁଆଲ ଗୋଟେ ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି ଭିତରେ ପୋଜିସନ କ'ଣ ଏବଂ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଜିନିଷ ହେଉଛି ବିଭିନ୍ନ ରିଲିଜିୟସ୍ କମ୍ୟୁନିଟି ଭିତରେ କି ପ୍ରକାର ରିଲେସନସିପ ଏକ୍ଜିଷ୍ଟ କରୁଛି ତାର ମଧ୍ୟ ତର୍ଜମା ଆବଶ୍ୟକ. It means that the content of politics itself is determined by one or another religion or the religious community. So religious politics cannot simultaneously be the politics of Hindus or politics of Muslims or politics of Christians. It can only belong to and may have appeal for the followers of one or the other religion. The politics that tries to defend what is taken to be Muslim identity or the politics that works towards creating a new or different identity for the Hindus, as is happening now, it cannot obviously appeal to another community. So this remains so even when it tries to present itself as nationalism. For example, as Hindutva calls itself cultural nationalism. Here also, another point should be clarified that a mere appeal to a particular religious group or a religion, it does not necessarily lead to religious politics. For example, one may be a Hindu, but the version or the interpretations of Hinduism one subscribes will determine the substance of politics. So different thinkers have different notions of religious politics. For example, Gandhi's view was that spiritual values should influence politics. He has not talked of religious values. It is spiritual values, which are more or less common to almost all the religions, because every religious ideology is based on value systems, the spiritual values, and that should influence politics. So according to Gandhi, if a politics could not, or a political ideology could not support one spiritual value, then that becomes impoverished, that is devalued. So he took a very inclusive view of both religion and politics. So he was able to get moral authority because he has capacity to draw it from the traditional sources. So Gandhi's view of substantive democracy in India through the concept of Purna Swaraj or Ramarajya is definitely one spiritual extension, one ethical extension of his ideology. So Gandhi gave a critique of liberal democracy, which in his view was linked with violence. The existing liberal democracy ki se ଗୋଟେ କ୍ରିଟିକାଲ ଆଙ୍ଗେଲରୁ ଆନାଲାଇଜ କରିଛନ୍ତି ଏବଂ କହିଛନ୍ତି ଦିସ୍ ଇଜ ସମଥିଙ୍ଗ ହ୍ୱିଚ୍ ଇଜ ଏ hypocritical system. For Gandhi, Swaraj is not political power. They are different. Swaraj is the true freedom. So, politics for Gandhi was a coalition of emancipatory faith. So he never used any religious festival or dogma for political mobilization. As you can see that, for example, some of the Hindu leaders, they have taken the help of Ganesh festival and all that in order to politically mobilize people. Gandhi has never used any religious festival for that purpose, for political mobilization. But he believes the essence of all the religions. He believes in the essence of all the religions. Then how does this religious politics evolve? Gradually, then our India in the religious politics, it has a long history. Towards the last decades of the 19th century, politics based on revivalism sentiments was becoming gradually very dominant, particularly in Bengal, in Maharashtra. During the 19th century, nationalist awakening was molded through social and cultural movements. And these movements were inspired by enlightened individuals. You know, this new mood of politics, which was based on revivalism, religious revivalism, it was first replacing the social movements which sought to question certain practices within Hinduism, like child marriage, enforced widowhood, denial of education for women. So it is interesting to note that most of the suggested reforms, they were related to the fate of the woman, making life more livable than them. And in Maharashtra also, soon after Tilak instituted the Sarvajanin Ganesh Puja as a major mode of mass mobilization against colonialism. So Ganesh Jatra was instituted by Gangadhar Tilak as a major mode of mass mobilization against also colonization. So it was also used as making people more nationalistic, more patriotic. So this is changing mood of revivalism. So notable figures and nationalists like Bankim Chandra Chatterjee in Bengal, Bal Gangadhar Tilak in Maharashtra, and many others like them. They joined this trend of Reformation and also Hindu revivalism. And the Hindu Orthodox group, many basic conservative Orthodox groups today, they are gradually becoming influential, and they talk in terms of Hindu religious sentiment. There is a lot of ICSSR research surveys on this Indian political thought. Those who have also, in the literature, they have focused on this religious politics of India. And in those research surveys, it is highlighted that the Bengali intellectuals, they linked the historiography of an organic nationalism to the classical antiquity of India. And rising Hindu revivalism got support from unexpected quarters. Vivekananda also had become enormously popular after his speech in the World Religious Parliament at Chicago. And also, he had a lot of contribution for this Hindu revivalism. And Vivekananda was one of the most influential Indian thinkers of the 19th century who was critical of social hierarchy, economic inequalities in Indian society. He emphasized on individual morality, social change. He emphasized that the greatness and the conduct of the individuals is molded by religion, and the greatness of a nation depends on the innate greatness of its people, the individuals. So Vivekananda's ideas contributed to spiritual awakening in India. So he once declared, I do not believe in reform, I believe in growth. He underlined that a cultural revolution can bring India back to its blissful state of affairs. So he urged upon the youth to join the national movement against the British. He declared, I do not believe in reform. I believe in growth. I do not dare to put myself in the position of God and dictate unto our society. This way you shall do, and not that way. So the leaders like Bankim Chatterjee was famous for his Vande Mataram, and also Tilak, who was also become very famous for his revivalist approach to Hinduism in Maharashtra. And the attempts of these revivalist leaders had given a different shape to Indian nationalism. So it was a period that when religion also has impacted the nationalistic spirit, and nationalism was possible only through political mobilization. So this was the beginning of interaction between or the relationship between religion and politics in India. So what was the aim of Hindu revivalism? Hindu Hinduism revival ବା ତାକୁ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ରିଫର୍ମେଟିଭ ମେଥଡ୍ସ ମାଧ୍ୟମରେ ତାକୁ ଧୀରେ ଧୀରେ ରିଭାଇଭ କରିବାର ଯୋଉ ଚିନ୍ତାଧାରା, its purpose was the search for and glorification of spiritual superiority of Indian tradition. And the thinkers associated with this Hindu revivalism, they trace the glory of Indian culture in Hindu symbols, Vedas, Indian traditions, and they underline the significance of these factors like Indian tradition, Vedas, Hindu symbols in explaining the nationalism. And this the trend that is the rise of political unrest. The emerging political temper based on the religious tribalism and cultural nationalism. It got a very powerful intellectual reinforcement and moral legitimization on an all India plane. And the writings of the sophisticated thinkers like Vivekananda, like Aurobindo Ghosh, they have contributed greatly to this intellectual reinforcement and moral legitimization. Both Vivekananda and Aurobindo, they have emphasized that India has a mission for the world. They say that the West is materially oriented, but India is more spiritually more oriented. So a time must come that India can guide the world. So within this mission, they glorify ancient India. The superiority of Vedanta. They also highlighted Indian tolerance, that no other nation is so tolerant as Indians. And likewise, so this is how the interpretation changes within the Hindu tradition discussed above had its parallel, though of a different kind, among the Muslims as well. The traditions within the Muslim religious community were also subjected to interventions and reworking by both the neo orthodoxy and the modernists. So similarly, in other religions like Muslim religion also, there are also trends of change. So there is also reference to the Islamic perspective. The interventions among the Muslims, starting roughly from the first half of the 19th century, also did not have a uniform character to them. Shah Awliya, Syed Ahmad of Bareilly, and their lesser known followers like Sariullah, Haji Shariatullah, or Maulavi of Faizabad, or Maulavi Karamat Ali of Jaunpur, all in the first half of the 19th century were influenced by the Wahhabi movement. They concentrated their attention on the un-Islamic practices prevalent among the Muslims, like the haq practices of joining each other's festivals, modes of salutation, greetings, common customs, and etiquettes. And those are also influenced by the surrounding Hindu ethos. Shah Syed Ahmad Khan best represents also the view. He was the founder of the Aligarh movement. And the Aligarh movement came to be known as Aligarh movement because it had started in Aligarh. The purpose of the Aligarh movement was to spread political consciousness among the Indian Muslims. Shah Syed founded Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College at Aligarh in 1875. It later developed into the present-day Aligarh Muslim University. So it means that in all the religions there are the revivalist trends. So what really happened? The orthodoxy did in the conflict between the Aurangzeb and Dara Shikoh, and some of they set out to build bridge between the Muslim gentry and the lower ranks of Muslims to provide enduring channels of communication within the community. Secondly, the intervention sought to bring a shift from the side of theological arguments addressed to the learned for political appeal to some form of mobilization of the people on broad themes. And thirdly, there was a consistent effort to reconstruct a healthier version of Islam as the ground on which the newly sought identity of Muslims could stand. In case of India, after the disaster of the partition, we are now in India when Hindus constitute largest part of the population. And the next biggest religious group is that of the Muslims, who make up about 11% of the population. Therefore, developments among the Hindus matter a lot more for the fate of India than other religious communities because they have become the dominant religious communities after the partition in independent India. Of the many developments and interpretative changes, we can make insight to three or four major consequences. The first is to give a monolithic unity to Hindu community, a body of doctrine held together in a theological whole. Hinduism as a religion with a very fluid boundary was seen as a liability in face of adversity. Secondly, to give strength to Hinduism. All the religious thinkers in the wake of revivalism within the soul, I mean, with the exception of Gandhiji, of course, they felt that Hinduism was weak and therefore it was first conquered by Muslims and then colonized by the British. It was the thinking of some, not of Gandhi. So, some of the strong Hindu revivalists, so they wanted to strengthen Hinduism. Simply because according to them, Hindu was, because it was a weak community, was first dominated by Muslim, then by British Raj, by the Westerners and all that. It is time to strengthen it. Otherwise, I mean, their feeling is that unless Hinduism shall not be invigorated, it shall not be strengthened, then India will remain threatened by outside powers and also by internal enemies. So that was the approach of the revivalist thinkers. So they feel that the unity and integrity of India can be conceived only in the unity and strength of Hinduism. Another important characteristics underlying revivalist thinking was a deep suspicion of these features of Hinduism, which to many other conscientious Hindus like Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, etc., were the beauty and strength of Hinduism. So no other religion had such a capacity, because it is the Hinduism alone which has the capacity to deal with diversity. Hinduism has the ability to generate innovative variety. No other religion had such a capacity. So gradually, the nationalist leaders drew their inspiration from religious icons, gods, and Vedas. They tried to heighten the sensibilities of their groups by advocating the reforms and rituals related to their respective faiths. The Islamic perspective drew sources from the historic past and attempted to unite the community by constructing a healthier version of Islam. Gradually, the differences led to conflicting perspectives. Still, the religious groups have started assuming a prominent role, thus making the issue of religious politics a continuous phenomenon. So we have reached a time where we cannot keep religion and politics apart. Religious politics is a must. It has become a continuous phenomenon. Then also another important concept is ethnicity and how it is related to nation state. Like any other third world country, after achieving independence from the colonial powers, India was also engaged with the project of nation building. ଯେକୌଣସି ଆଫ୍ରିକାନ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରି ଯେଉଁମାନେ ପ୍ରଥମେ ବିଭିନ୍ନ ୱେଷ୍ଟର୍ଣ୍ଣ ପାୱାର ଦ୍ୱାରା କଲୋନି ରୁଲରେ ଥିଲେ, independence ପାଇବା ପରେ ପ୍ରଥମ ଟାସ୍କଟା କ'ଣ? ନେସନ ବିଲ୍ଡିଂ, ହାଉ ଟୁ ବିଲ୍ଡ ଦି ନେସନ. So leadership of the country at that time believed that the only way to achieve overall development of society was to have democratic political system in the country based on the principle of secularism, principle of liberty, socialism, and that is the reason that in the new constitution in case of India have made arrangements of spaces for these concepts like secularism, liberty, fraternity, socialism. Likewise, and to achieve these principles, we have already discussed that how we have introduced Nehruvian or Mahalanobis models of development. But the main task of nation building was to carry forward this mission amidst the ethnic diversities. And apart from the caste and religious and tribal groups, the diversities in India ranged in terms of culture, language, regional developments, etc. So during the past 2 decades following independence, attempt in the quest for building India as a nation state was basically based on modernization or the developmental westernization model. And from 1980s onwards, the Hindu rightist forces in the country, represented by the BJP and its fraternal organizations, They are attempting to project India as a nation state or Hindu state based on the principle of cultural nationalism. So, how to conceptualize ethnicity? Generally, ethnicity is considered as the mobilization of a group of people who share common attributes in terms of culture, language, religion, history, etc. So that they are members of a common group. They have common attributes, common culture, for example, common language, common religion, common history, etc. They take pride in the common history, and they are also different from other ethnic groups which share their own common culture, religion, language, etc. And a nation state is a sovereign geographical entity whose foundation is the shared sentiment of a community based on the history, culture, language, religion, and civilization. Some scholars they do not consider India as a nation state. They argue that the basis of the foundation of a nation state is single nation or nationality. In such a society, people share a single common language, common culture, or even religion. Since there are large number of nationalities in India, different languages, different cultures, different attributes, different religions. So some scholars argue that this is a multinational state, so not a nation state, because we have not a single language, not a single culture, not a single caste, not a single religion. So it is a multinational state. Some it is the argument of some of the scholars. कि ଆମେ ଆକୁ କେମିତି nation state କହିବା? But however, in Indian context, the terms nation state, nation or multinational state, they are used interchangeably. Virtually, in our Indian context, we feel that these words they mean the same thing. So, how do the people share common attributes of culture, language, religion within a particular territorial limits, or even cutting across different regions, form a group which can be called one ethnic group, which is distinct from other groups. There are basically three perspectives to explain this question: the primordial, the instrumentalist, and the perspective. These are the three perspectives to explain this question. According to the primordialist approach, the ethnic differences among the people are given, they are inherited. ସେମାନେ ନିଜଟା acquire କରିନାହାନ୍ତି, that has been given to them. So these differences are bound to take the form of ethnic conflict between the groups. Whatever the instrumentalist approach, they are different from the primordialist. Their approach is to believe that the ethnic differences are not given, they are created by the elites. See, society elite mane seta create karchanti. That is self-acquired. Elite mane kiye? They may be politicians, they may be educationists, they may be religious leaders. So they manipulate the social cleavage of differences, and particularly the leaders, they manipulate the difference to attain their goals. So this is the second perspective, that is instrumentalist. Primordialist mane kale that the differences are inherited. Instrumentalist mane kale no, that is created by the elite of that particular society. But another perspective is there with these two perspectives, primordial or instrumentalist, they are unable to explain. This third perspective advocates the combination of both these approaches. Primordialist और instrumentalist approach को मिश्रण करके आउट थर्ड पर्सपेक्टिव से मैंने तैयारी करी. It advocates the combination of both. They explain as to how people sharing common and get activated into the ethnic groups. Then, regarding the manifestation of ethnicity, the understanding of this ethnicity, ethnic group kahaku kahajaye? Members of a particular group, they share common values, common culture, common history, common language. Likewise, sometimes also they occupy a compact region. The understanding of this ethnicity will take a back sit in the phase of development, which would follow as a result of the Mahalanobis model, boosting the process of nation state building. And it was contested also. So much before the results of the Mahalanobis model, it became visible. The premise on which it was based was questioned. It was argued that such a model of nation building ignored the smaller nationalities in the country. A प्रकार मॉडल देशरे थिबा स्मॉलर नेशनलिटीज मानकर इंटरेस्ट को सेफगार्ड करि पारि नाहंती. It was an impression on them. Their identities, cultures, history, aspirations were neglected. Smaller nationalities मानकर परिचय, सेमानकर संस्कृति, सेमानकर इतिहास, सेमानकर aspiration को neglect कराई छि मॉडल रे. So Mahalanobis model was questioned on these grounds. Started with the revolt of the Nagas in the northeast. That was ethnic revolt. Northeast ଆମର उत्तर पूर्व अंचल रे mostly देखिए ethnic minorities माने बहुत रहिसंती. It started with the Naga revolt. It spread also to Tamil Nadu in the south, Punjab and Jammu Kashmir in north. So ethnic challenges to the nation building continued in almost all parts of the country. And since then, on the lines of caste, religion, region, language, tribes, etc., this ethnic revolts they continue. So to the nation building activity, there are ethnic challenges. They pose a threat. And these challenges took certain shape. For example, in some regions of the country, there are autonomous movements. That is a ethnic challenge. They take the shape of autonomous movement. हमको autonomy दियो. Even in some corners of the country, this ethnic challenge take a still aggressive form. That is demand for secession. अलगा ହେଇଯିବୁ ଆମେ secede କରିଯିବୁ. Secession movement ମାନେ କ'ଣ? ଆମେ ଆଉ ଦେଶ ଭିତରେ ନ ରହିକରି ଅଲଗା ହେଇଯିବୁ. That is extreme step. Demand have taken. ଏବଂ ଆଉ ହେଉଛି insurgency. ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ଅନେକ ଜାଗାରେ ମଧ୍ୟ insurgency କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକଳାପ ହେଉଛି. And also sometimes this ethnic challenge takes the form of conflict riots on the basis of identity markers like tribe, caste, language, religion. ଏପରି ବିଭିନ୍ନ ସେପ୍ରେ ନେସନ ବିଲ୍ଡିଂ ଆକ୍ଟିଭିଟି ପ୍ରତି ethnic challenges ରହୁଛି. The ethnic groups they keep on attacking. They pose threats on the nation building activity. ତେଣୁ ଅଟୋନୋମି ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟ ଡିମାଣ୍ଡସ୍ ଫର ସିସେସନ୍ ବା ଇନସର୍ଜେନ୍ସି ଏଗୁଡ଼ାକୁ ଆମେ କହିପାରିବା these are self determination movements. These movements are meant to self determination ତାକୁ ସେମାନେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଯେ ସେମାନେ ସେମାନଙ୍କର ଅଧିକାରକୁ ସାବ୍ୟସ୍ତ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ନିଜକୁ ଡିଟରମିନ୍ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଏ ମୁଭମେଣ୍ଟ ଗୁଡ଼ାକ କରିଛନ୍ତି. It needs to be noted that these forms of manifestation do not follow a uniform sequence of occurrence in the country. It might start with one form and assume another form in different situations. From the 1950s onwards, the conflicts based on these have been common in various regions of the country. So some of the scholars like Saligas Harrison, he termed the first 2 decades following independence, ସ୍ୱାଧୀନତାର next ପରବର୍ତ୍ତୀ 2 ଦଶନ୍ଧି 20 years ପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ସେ କହିଲେ that is the period of most as he termed it as the most dangerous decade, referring to the linguistic or communal conflicts. ସେ କହିଲେ ଏହି ସମୟରେ ବହୁତ language conflict ଆଉ religious conflict ହେଲା. ଏଣୁ ଏଇ 2 ଦଶନ୍ଧି ହେଉଛି most critical period, very dangerous period. The linguistic reorganization of the states created the states on the basis of common linguistic traits. ଅନେକ ସମୟରେ state ଗୁଡାକ reorganize କରାଗଲା language basis. Even Odisha was formed the first state to be organized on the basis of language. So along with the nationalistic movements, along with the nationalistic sentiments, these secessionist tendencies, the ethnic movements, they have existed as a concomitant feature, simultaneous feature. So what was the response of the state to these movements? ए प्रकार ethnic movement गुड़ाको state रो response कौन? The response of the state depends on the context of political situation. गोटे स्टेट ए प्रकार एजिटेशन बा मूवमेंट को केमती मैनेज करिवो सेटा से समय राजनीतिक कंटेक्स्ट बा विभिन्न फैक्टर को लेकर कंसीडर करा जाए. The general pattern of the state response to the ethnic manifestation in India has included coercion, accommodation, causing the division within the ethnic movements, appeasement, or patronage to a particular section of the leadership of the movement. It means what? State can take different stands to quell these movements. A movement को दबाया ପାଇଁ state विभिन्न stand नहीं पारे. For example, in certain cases, this state can coerce, threaten करी पाए. Leaders of these movements माननको ऊपर चाप प्रयोग करके से movement को दबाई दे पारे. Coercion, sometimes accommodation. सेमानकर डिमांड को मध्य to some extent बेले बेले से accommodate करी पारे, ग्रहण करी पारे. किबा? Another tactic is how to make divisions in the movement. धरो का आंदोलन होची, आंदोलन टाको भांगी दवा पे आउट टेक्निक कोन? How to make division. सेमानकर लीडरशिप भीतर सेमानकर रैंक एंड फाइल भीतर किंदी डिविजन सृष्टि करो. अब बेले बेले अपीसमेंट मध्य संतुष्टिकरण ए सेसेशनिस्ट मूवमेंट मानकर आंदोलन परिमाण किंदी संतुष्टिकरण करा जाय. So what type of action this state should take towards these ethnic movements, it depends on various situations. So one scholar, Paul Brass, he has argued that in the 1950s and 1960s, the central government had pursued unwritten rules towards the ethnic conflicts. There is no such written rules, they can't karajivo, unwritten rules. Not considering the demand for the political recognition of the religious communities, no concession to the demand of the linguistic, regional, and other culturally defined groups, and no concession to the cultural groups in conflict unless both sides support it substantially. For example, it was not until the demand for a Punjabi Subha got the support of the leadership in Haryana for a separate Hindi-speaking area that the Punjabi Subha, the state of Punjab, was created. So, we can find a lot of cases of these ethnic movements or ethnic uprisings in the country. The most important region is northeastern region, Uttar Purvanchal. You know, the very geographical location, diverse ethnic composition of the states of Northeast India, they have encouraged these programs of ethnicity. So the ethnic groups like NSCN, that is National Socialist Council of Nagaland, it has come up in Naga. So this is an umbrella organization under the leadership of this National Socialist Council of Nagaland. And sometimes they have gone up to the stand of questioning the sovereignty of Indian state and the concept of nation state. Then the areas of Assam, which were inhabited by the Khasis, Garos and Jaintias, it had witnessed the movement for an autonomous state in 1960s. Then it resulted in the formation of a separate state of Meghalaya. Garo Khasi Jaintia tribes ମାନଙ୍କର ethnic demand ଯୋଗୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ନୂଆ state ତିଆରି ହେଲା ମେଘାଳୟ out of Assam. In Assam, there are agitations for creation of autonomous states like Bodoland, Karbi Anglang. So those movements are still going on. So the target in the insurgency movements is the sovereignty of the state, police, army, other institutions. So the insurgency and the autonomy movements, they often result in ethnic riots, particularly with the tribes. So all these types of developments get linked to the state policies regarding the northeastern region of the country. There is also some period of time in Tamil Nadu also there are ethnic movements. The Dravidian movement of Tamil Nadu became the representative of this in this region, originating in the self-respect movement and later getting articulated in the form of the Justice Party. DK and DMK, that is Dravida Mitra Kazhagam. The Dravidian nationalism questioned the dominant notion of the nationalism and nation state in the country on three grounds: religion, language, and caste. The pioneer of the Dravidian movement, this nationalism, is E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, popularly known as Periyar. He argued that the dominant nationalism in India was articulated by the Congress, which was based on the Hindu religion or Brahminism, Hindi language, and high castes, especially Brahminism. It was antithetical to the Dravidian nationalism, based on the non-Aryan Dravidian religion, Tamil language, and the low castes. So it was necessary to protect the Dravidian identity and nationalism. It was the argument of the Dravidian movement. And the legacy of Periyar, it was carried forward by CM Anadurai and also Karunanidhi, M. Karunanidhi. So this is how the ethnic movements, Dravidian movements, they continued in Tamil Nadu. Then also there are some instances of ethnicity in Punjab, which was manifested mainly in the form of autonomy movement and insurgency. Sometimes it had taken the form of communal conflicts between the Hindus and the Sikhs. And Punjab has witnessed autonomy movement during 1950s and 1960s, which was spearheaded by the Akali Dal. And the Akali Dal and their leaders argue that the areas of Punjab which was inhabited by the people whose mother tongue was Punjabi and who have followed Sikh religion should be given an autonomous province of their own. Of course, there are two groups within the Akali Dal, one represented by Sant Fateh Singh, giving the socio-economic explanation, and another was represented by Master Tara Singh, who justified the demand for Punjabi Suba on the religious grounds. for the autonomous province of the Sikhs. These are few cases, instances we are discussing. And there are also cases of ethnic movements, autonomous movements in Jammu and Kashmir. The autonomous movements of the insurgency is in J&K. It was linked to the geographical, historical, and religious factors. Before the accession, the political leadership in the state had been divided on the basis of relationship to the nation state. While King Hari Singh, who wanted to retain it as an independent state, opposed the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India. The most popular leader of the state, Sheikh Abdullah, wanted it to be merged with India. But once the state had acceded to India and Sheikh Abdullah became the prime minister of the state, the post which existed only in the state and later on it was converted to the post of chief minister. He started wavering on the issue of Jammu and Kashmir's accession to India. And he formed the plebiscitary fund, which provided and also which provoked the central government to pose and imprison him from 1953 till 1964. So Sheikh Abdullah, who wanted to accede to Indian Union in opposition to Hari Singh's proposal, after he came to power, he started wavering on this issue of and this has given. So he was imprisoned from 1953 to 1964. There have been demands for autonomy within the state and of Jammu and Kashmir from two regions, Jammu and Ladakh. Likewise, the history more or less we know, but finally now it is on state of Indian Union. After the withdrawal of Article 370, under which J&K was enjoying the autonomous status and all that, it was withdrawn. So now it is a normal state of Indian Union. So this charter has given us some broad idea that India is a multi-religious, multicultural, multilingual country. And ethnicity, that is why, is one of the greatest challenges which works as a obstacle on the way of nation building. It manifests in the form of self-determination movements. The autonomy movements, secessionist movements, insurgency, ethnic conflicts and riots. And we have gone some of the instances of these ethnic movements in northeastern regions, the Naga and Jews in northeast, Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu, Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab, as the autonomous movements had continued for some time. It has been argued by some scholars that the nation state building model is an attempt of the dominant leadership in the country to subordinate the smaller nationalities. So, to retrieve the situation, there has from the nation state building to genuine federation building. Ethnic movements, secessionist activities must be controlled, must be suppressed. So, So some people, some scholars insist that it should be a policy of federation building instead of nation building, which can accommodate all the interests, all the cultures, religions, and all that. So for the last 8 classes, we are discussing various facets, dimensions of democracy and development in India. So discourses on both democracy and development denotes two contradictory points about their assessments. One assessment is that democracy and development, they have succeeded, and the other one is that they have failed. So assessment can be both ways, that they have succeeded or they have failed as partners. So following independence, India adopted a democratic system of governance. Institutions of democracy in India, we have opted for a parliament because we want to adopt the principle of universal. Hello? Hello, hello? Am I audible? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we are now almost going to finish the discussion, making the assessments on democracy and development. So following independence, India opted for a parliamentarian form of government in order to make the nation state based on the principle of universal adult franchise and periodic election, in contrast to the village level governments in the light of the Gandhian principles. Assessment of the democracy in Indian context depends on the indices used to indicate or measure it. There are mainly there are two models of indices regarding democracy. One is institutional model and also minimal and procedural democracy, and another related to the substantive and effective democracy. So, what about the procedural democracy? The observers of the procedural democracy largely believe that democracy in India has been successful. The criteria for these assessments are participation and competition. These are indicated by the frequency of election, because elections are nothing but the procedure for participation of the people in governance. So, procedural democracy is indicated by the frequency of election in India, competition among political parties to contest elections, the advocates of this approach, they are very much hopeful about the success of the electoral politics in India. Those who see success of India in terms of elections, participation, and competition among the political parties, they follow survey methods to measure democracy. They infer the dominant trends in the election in terms of the turnout and the percentage of vote or use of statistical methods like correlation, coefficiency, and the regression analysis. They see the multivariable relationship of the turnout percentage and participation with the socio-economic data in particular constituencies. And on the grounds that analysis of this analysis is based on survey and takes into account the socio-economic and political factors of a particular region. Procedural democracy was meant to contribute to the nation building in India. The focus of the studies on democracy in India In the earlier decades following independence had been to examine as to how it helped in the nation building through the introduction of the universal adult suffrage and periodic elections. However, the hopes they relied in the following period. Scholars like Harrison, they apprehended a dangerous decade in India in the 1960s in the face of recurrent linguistic and ethnic violence. The violence which started in the 1950s itself, it was further escalated in 1960s and 70s. The defeat of the Congress in several states in 1967 assembly elections and the imposition of emergency in the country during 1975 to 1977, they are example of people's discontentment of emergency. Scholars, they responded to emergency as an aberration. Some scholars, they have become highly critical of modernization thesis. The predominance of the modernization approach cast in the behavioral, structural, functional analysis accorded priority to the question whether India would survive as a nation state or not. So procedural democracy, these are the arguments for and against by the advocates and by its critics. So the critics of the procedural democracy is provided by the scholars who have extended arguments in favor of substantive democracy. In their opinion, procedural democracy views the democracy in a very limited way. Suppose the emphasis on election. The electoral democracy is minimal democracy. Free and fair election, universal suffrage, political parties, pressure groups, and availability of the constitution, they are not sufficient conditions for a successful democracy. Though they are necessary, but they are not sufficient conditions. So they extended the argument that substantive democracy can only provide a successful answer. And in the past 2 decades in India, substantive democracy has also found a significant place. The assessment of substantive democracy is sought to be made in relation to the role of state with democracy on the issues concerning nation state, secularism, welfareism, and development in India. And also regarding the role of state on these issues. And also issues like globalization. Niraja Joyal argues that there are 2 types of arguments regarding relationship between the state and democracy. One is there can be no democracy without an effective state, which can exist when there is a strong civil society to counter the authoritarianism of the state. So Strong civil society constitute one substance of democracy, a part of the substantive democracy. Here, Joel argues that both state and society, they are complementary to each other. Civil society, which constitutes an essential ingredient of substantive democracy, and in India, there are two viewpoints regarding the civil society. Excuse. One viewpoint considers all associations and collective actions as civil society, irrespective of the issues they take up. And the second viewpoint says that only those associations which take up two issues of universal significance, not sectarian, and those foundations is secular, universal, are considered to be civil society. And quite recently, a new debate, it has got momentum in our country. The debate between the communitarian and the liberal. The relationship between the individuals and the communities within and between them. Then the rise of identity politics, that is Dalits, OBCs, women, tribals, ethnic and environmental issues, etc. The new social movements and the inability of the discourse which privilege democracy with elections, they have necessitated the focus on substantive democracy. So with the advent of this identity politics, the focus has turned to substantive democracy. With the introduction of, as we have already discussed in some of the, that the introduction of the 73rd and 74th Constitution amendments, the decentralization has been democratized. And with the introduction of these constitutional amendments, the scope of democracy has expanded to include the women, OBCs, and Dalits at the grassroots levels. But prior to this amendment, the dominant social groups exclusively dominated the institutions of the local self-governance. Usually the assessment of democracy in India has been done at the national, state and district level. And the functioning of the democracy at these levels have been dependent on each other. And there has been the top-bottom, not the bottom-top approach to democracy in India. Atul Kohli, one of the scholars, he has covered these three levels, nation, state and district, in his book, Democracy and Discontent, India's Crisis of Governability. He has elaborately discussed this particular issue. Scholars like O'Donnell have underlined the need to see the differences within democracy. Following this tradition, Patrick Heller, he has disaggregated democracy in order to view its degree in India, comparing Kerala with the rest of India, he gave his opinion that there is more democracy in Kerala than the rest of the country. It is his version, of course, his arguments, his analysis. It is possible due to the existence of the robust civil society. He has made his remark that according to him, there is the existence of a robust civil society in Kerala. That is why there is more of democracy in Kerala than the rest of India. And an effective state. Hence, the effective, substantive democracy is indicated by the progress in the areas of education, health, and distributive justice. Their extension to the subaltern groups. So virtually, civil society plays a very, very notable role, very significant role in the success of substantive democracy. In Rajani Kothari's opinion, the Indian state played significant role in building democracy in the past 2 decades following independence, because it implemented welfare schemes, development programs. Though it was a very moderate state, Indian democracy during this phase was marked by accommodation of all the interests and also building consensus, because that was the primary requirement during those periods just after independence. But since 1970s, especially with the promulgation of emergency in India, the executive concentrated power in its hands, and this has eroded the moderateness of the state. So state was no longer moderate, and as a result, the executive resorted to populism, undermining the democratic institutions and personalizing the institutions. Virtually, the state started acting against democracy after the imposition of emergency during 1970s. This is regarding the views of some scholars regarding democracy. Then what about development? Development is also a recurrent theme in discussion on democracy and social change. The concept of development has been used mainly by the sociologists and political scientists on the other hand, and by the economists also on the other side. So sociologists and political scientists on the one hand, and by the economists on the other hand, this development has been interpreted. It was a modernization paradigm. And it became popular to discuss the political and social change in the developing countries like India, particularly the countries which have been liberated themselves from the foreign Raj, foreign yoke. The modernization or development theories influenced by behavioralism, they're mainly concerned with the question to how a particular system maintain itself by accommodating various segments of the system. So it provides space for change. For the economists, development meant the growth in terms of the per capita income and GNP. Amartya Sen has provided alternative model of development. For him, the per capita income and the GNP are important, but not enough indicators or enough indices of development. And development, according to Amartya Sen, in the real sense of the term, means developing the human capabilities among the people, and entitlements in terms of education, health, infrastructure, and liberty. So, Amartya Sen has provided an unequivocal perspective on development and democracy. They are not incompatible. Rather, democracy and developments, they are complementary to each other. Democracy is possible only if people in a society have the entitlements and they possess the capabilities which enable them to be the part of democratic process. If the people are deprived of their entitlements, then democracy is meaningless for them. The most essential ingredient, component of democracy is freedom. And freedom promotes development in terms of entitlements and the capabilities of the people. And development is also contingent upon democracy. Another scholar also has talked about on this debate on relationship between democracy and development. Naturally, question is whether they are compatible or whether they are inimical. Deepak Nair argues that in India, there has been tension between economic development and political democracy. There is inclusion of the people, especially of the poor, in the democratic processes, but they have been excluded from the market. So political democracy may be successful because they have been included in the political process. But real development has not been done to them because they have been excluded from the market. The market has seen the exclusive predominance of the elite. So the poor, the common masses, they are excluded from the market. And the state has been mainly concerned with the management of the interests and conflicts of the elites, not of the non-elites, the poor and all that. So during the post-independence period, the role of the state vis-a-vis the management of conflicts and towards the interest of the poor, especially the poor, has passed through three phases from 1947 to 1966, 1967 to 1990s, and from 1990 onwards. The first phase was marked by the prominent role of the state. The state made, the first phase was marked by prominent role of the state, which was able to reach the consensus of the various interests. In the second phase, there was an erosion in the effectiveness of the state. And the third phase, which was known as a phase of liberalization, because this globalization buggy has come, it is marked by the erosion of in the credibility of the state and the rising role of the market. Then Pranab Bardhan argues that democracy and development are irreconcilable. He said that there are main proprietary classes in India: industrial capitalist class, rich farmers, and the professional in the public sector. And their interests are in conflict, and the state plays a mediating role among them. And at the same time, there is turmoil from below. The associations of various disadvantaged groups. So there is a conflict between their interest and those of the propertied classes. But we have gone through the versions of Amartya Sen, Pranab Bardhan, then also Deepak Nair and all that about democracy and development. But the thing is that as Amartya Sen, I think he has done more of justice by providing an unequivocal perspective on development and democracy. They are not incompatible, they are compatible, they are complementary. Freedom, which is one important ingredient of democracy, it promotes development in terms of entitlements. So, both democracy and development can be possible when there shall be proper participation of the people in the democratic process and also fulfillment of their entitlements. So, virtually, we have more or less finished the discussion on this subject, that is India, democracy and development, which is virtually MPS 003, so far as your syllabus is concerned. Regarding these chapters, some of the questions can be, for example, so far as religious politics is concerned, how is religious politics different from issues of religion and politics? What are the essence or features of religious politics? The questions can be asked about the evolution of religious politics in India. Then also questions can be on Hindu revivalism. Then also questions can be asked about the Islamic perspective of religious politics. Then the significance of the religion in mobilization of national movements. Regarding ethnicity or concept of nation state, various case studies may be asked also as questions. For example, the case studies of Northeast India, the ethnicity in the context of Northeast, in case of Punjab, in case of Tamil Nadu, Jammu, Kashmir, and all that, case studies can be given. Then to define ethnicity and discuss its various perspectives. So, what are the various types or manifestations of ethnicity? Then, what are the challenges posed by ethnicity on nation building? Then, regarding democracy, there can be definition of democracy and its evolution in India. Then, various conceptions of democracy. There can be questions on procedural democracy, merits, demerits, substantive democracy, its merits, demerits, or a critique of substantive democracy or a critique of procedural democracy. We can expect questions to evaluate the ongoing debates on democracy and development. Then also analysis of various scholars like Amartya Sen, Pranab Bardhan, or Deepak Nair, or some of such scholars, those who have interpreted democracy and development in their own way. Questions may be asked, or such questions also can be there. And there may be broad questions on the relationship between development and democracy. Maybe a question may be asked that democracy and development and democracy, they are not incompatible. Expand or explain like that. So this is all about the discussions on various courses and all that. And few questions also I have given for the previous chapters. For example, what do you understand by human development, various approaches to human development, then basic minimum needs program, then identify indicators of human development, like that. And also regarding gender and development, there can be questions on development. What is development? How does it help in ensuring rights of women? Identify various agencies of development. Then short notes on gender equity. Then women in development approach, that is WID, etc. Then also questions can be on migration, like internal and external migration. Then also the causes of internal migration. Then what are the migration streams in India? Has there been a change in this ratio all over the years? What are the causes of over-urbanization? How can this problem be addressed and all that? I mean, several questions can be put. Okay. Now we have reached the end of the discussion and discussed few questions. Okay. I now extend my thanks to all the participants for their patient listening. Hello, dear friends. Should I quit
Thank
the platform now?
Yes, sir.
Hello. So today we have discussed all the chapters included in this MPS 003. Thank you. Wish you all the best.
Thank you,
With
sir.
all. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now I'm leaving the platform.
କହୁଥିଲି ସେଟା ହଉନାହିଁ ମାନେ ସେ
Hello.
କରିଦେଲା ବେଳକୁ ସେମାନେ